All right, let's get started then. Hello everyone, welcome to our Blackbird Cloud Tech Talk. This time we're going to talk about infra as code, the Blackbird way. I'm going to tell you about how we create a workflow for building your infrastructure project from scratch. So you can get going with your brand new infra project. First I will talk a bit about who we are. Then we'll dive into the infra code. So we'll talk about some common problems setting up your infrastructure project, how you can use Terraform modules, and how we set up our projects to be modular, so you can maintain your project better. And afterwards we have Q&A. If you have any questions during the talk, just put them in the chat and I'll try to answer them. First, who are we? We are Blackbird Cloud. We are a cloud development and consulting company. We build cloud infrastructure for different companies. And sometimes we also do these tech talks where we share our expertise to you guys. So these are the values that Blackbird is built upon. So we have reliability, partnership, expertise, transparency, and acceleration. They are sharing my expertise and transparency in our way of working to accelerate your own cloud project as well. So let's dive straight into the common problems we see when people are setting up their infra as code projects. So often when you have a brand new app and you want to deploy your app to the cloud, you probably want to start out with Terraform. And when people start out, they often start out in a monolithic structure. So that means building everything in one big project. And often the case, as you see here on the right, they have some resources and some variables, and I'll put that in one project file. This is at the start, it's quick, it's nice and easy, but once your project grows, becomes harder to maintain as well. So often with one file, you have one state, which is basically the state of your infrastructure. And having one state makes it difficult to collaborate together because the state gets locked when you try to apply changes. Also keeping track of the dependencies of your resources. You see here on the line 11, you have depends on. So you depend on the previous resource. Well, with two resources, it's easy to keep track of. But if you have a bunch of infrastructure and a lot of resources in your file, it can be quite hard to keep track of what's dependent on what and what needs to be deployed first. Also for repeatability, so if you want to create, for example, another instance, you need to duplicate your code, which is not nice. Of course, we want to create less code and just put some variables in there to create more instances, for example. So how can we solve this? Well, one way of solving this is using Terraform modules. So how can these modules help you? Well, in a module, we have all the resources, or one or more resources for a certain infrastructure you want. So for example, an instance, and then we can have the variables and the resources and the outputs of that resource in one contained module, which we can use over and over. So where can you find these modules? Well, you can build them yourself, of course, but there's also a Terraform registry, which you can use to download all the published open source projects that are out there. What are some advantages for these modules then? Well, standardizes your code. So if you want to create multiple instances, every instance is built in the same way, which makes it easier to reuse them. And of course, once you build your own modules, it's nice to open source them so other people can use them as well. So an example here on the right, we have a virtual VPC module. We import them from the Terraform registry. So we have a Blackbird Cloud virtual VPC with the version, and then we have some inputs for the module as well, the name and the setup proc in this case. So this way it makes it easier to reuse your resources. And using these Terraform modules, we can create a modular project structure, which helps you even more. So for creating a modular project structure, we use another tool, which is called Terragrunt, which basically helps you have multiple states in your project. So for each module that you use, you have a separate state. So that makes it also possible to collaborate together and to work on different parts of your system at the same time. So on the right here, we have the project example. So this is basically the folder layout that we use. So we have a cloud folder, which all has our environments in there, in this case, development and production. And then we have in there some resources that we use. And we've numbered them as well, so we can keep track easy what the dependencies are for each resource. And we also have a module folder, which has our own custom modules that we're not yet published, or want to make changes to existing ones, we can download them in there and make some changes. And a template folder for any other configuration that you might use in your resources. And then there's also some shared config in there, which we can use to set global config that we use in all instances, for example, account names or prefixes for your resources, things like that. So let's look at the project template a bit more in depth. So we're going to use Terragrunt there, and we will show you the module structure and the shared config and how you can implement a custom module. So this is the project template we created. So here on the left, you see again the 3 different folders, the cloud, the modules, and templates. Then we have some linting config, some Terragrunt and Terraform versions. So these versions are tied to this project. Then we have a global config. So this one tells us some few global settings that we can use in our other folders. And we have here a secret subs file, which stores our super secret passwords for our apps that we want to use. So we can encrypt this and commit to our Git repo. So let's look at a example here. So let's go into cloud folder, into a production environment. We see here a remote state file. So in here, we define our remote state. In this case, this is a backend with S3 bucket. Some configs here. At the top here, we can see we import the global settings, which we're using here again in the remote state config. So we can use them to set some options here. So let's go into the production environment. We have another config for specifically this production environment. So for example, we have an account ID, environment name, another, again, the global config. And we also set our download directory here for the cache. This is nice when you have a lot of modules and folders, all the cache is in the same folder. So if you run out of disk space, you can easily clear your cache there. We set some default tags for all resources. This is nice. So every resources you create, you get a path on which folder it's created from and your repository name as well. So you can easily find stuff in your cloud console. And we create a provider for configuration. In this example, it's an Amazon one, but you might also use Google Cloud or Azure here, or a completely different one as well. So let's then look at some resources. So we numbered them. So the first one is the VPC. So in here, we can import a Terraform module. This creates this virtual VPC for us. So this is published on the Terraform registry, which is using this prefix here. And then we have our namespace, our module name, and the version. And of course, we have some inputs for that. So we have the name, the CIDR block, and the account ID, which we can import from our shared config as well, which is called here environment. But I think it's imported from this Terragrunt one, which we also import here on the root. Of course, we also import remote state to store our state in the S3 bucket. So each module that we use here, each folder, imports this remote state. So every module has its own state, so we can work together. And for the instance, we do the same things. We include the common config, the remote state, and we have a new option here, which is the dependency. So we have a dependency on the VPC, which we define by the config path. And by using that, the Terragrunt tooling will create the VPC first and then the instance. As you can see here, the module that we use is our own custom module. So that's in the module folder. And in the inputs, we can also use the output from the VPC by referencing it as well. So in the module folder, we have our instance module. And here we can see all our Terraform files that we normally would have created for each instance, but now we can reuse them. So we have our resource, some outputs, and the variables to create them, and the versions required for this module. So we need the Amazon provider to create an instance, and we need a Terraform version either one. In the template folder, we can have some extra configs or config files or policy files or whatever we might need for our resources. So in this case, here's just an example policy, which is not applied to anything yet, but we can create a new resource that can use this policy. Then for the passwords, we have this SOPs file, which we also create a local, which we can later import in our instance as well. And we can encrypt this using a key, and this key can be stored in your cloud resource as well. And we can then save our super secret passwords in the Git repo encrypted, so you don't publish your passwords to the public. So using this module structure, we can just more easily work together. Let me go back to the slides. So this is basically the infra as code backward way. We use Terragrunt to have better state management and make collaboration between projects possible, and also working at the same time at things. We have of course, the folder structure, which makes the modularity possible. We have some shared config, which makes it easier, and you don't repeat yourself as often. And we use a lot of the open source modules, which we also make ourselves and publish, but also other ones that are out there we use as well. So yeah, this was the presentation. Are there any questions? I see a question. With the ever-changing cloud infrastructure, how can we keep this working structure intact while at the same time working on experimental features? Yes, good question. So what we can do is create a new folder, a new environment, by just duplicating our code. I can change my screen again. I can show you. So we have our production environment here in our cloud folder. If we duplicate this code folder and we call it, for example, development, we can change in our shared config for this development environment. We change the name, of course, and give the new account ID. And if we created this account in our cloud environment, we set the configuration here correctly, we can deploy these exact same resources in that environment, which makes it easy to duplicate your code and make, for example, if we want to change here the networking to a different one, we can do that and easily test things out without destroying our production. Hope that answers your question. All right, I think we're done with the presentation. Here's still some references from the stuff we used today. So there are some Terraform modules and the tooling, this Terragrunt. You can check them out. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you